Can you guys hear me okay?
Yep.
Excellent. Just a quick sound check on you guys. I hear all three of you.
Hello.
Yes, great. Excellent. Well, thank you again to our panelists here for joining us for our next session in our Wednesday slate of programming for Boston Startup Week. Audience, if this is your first time joining us, I'm going to take a few seconds just to how to navigate this portal. Just to make sure, we have one session that is playing right now. So I'm sorry, we have two. This is how to build your customer advisory board. If you're looking for the Angels and Demons session, please go to the top left corner, the agenda tab, and you'll be able to navigate your way to join that session. If you're here for the customer advisory board, you're in the right place. Good job. For those of you that are going to have questions throughout the panel for the audience, please put those in the Q&A section. If you do put those in the chat, I'll be there to monitor that chat area and help kind of nudge you towards Q&A. But we really want to make sure that the panelists and the moderator can see the questions that you're asking. We also are going to be having a contest. We're running a contest right now. If there are any quotes from our panel today or from our moderator that you really love, feel free to share them on social media and tag Boston Startup Week. The winners, will have 5 winners that will receive a $100 gift card to a Black-owned business here in the Boston area. And so we're super excited to be able to launch that with our sponsorship partners. Without further ado, I do want to pass it off to our moderator, Audrey. So Audrey, take it away.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Brandon, for introducing us. My name is Audrey Hasagala, and I am a customer success manager at Luma Health. And today we will be talking about customer advisory boards. So in terms of customer advisory boards, paying attention is what makes your startup successful. Sometimes, as a startup continues to build its offering, they may create a customer advisory board, or a CAB. A CAB is a group of key customers that a company invites to periodic meetings to offer feedback on product as well as overall impressions of the company. With this in mind, when is the ideal time to start a customer advisory board? And how do you know if it's the right fit for you? During this panel, we will be discussing about the understanding of what a CAB is good for, how to know when you should start one, and how to get the most out of a CAB once you've established it. Today, we will be joined by 2 panelist speakers, and I'll have Ben and Kalina Bryant introduce themselves. So Ben, why don't you get started, introduce yourself, and then as a fun icebreaker, can you tell us what your favorite after-school snack was growing up?
I mean, easy because it's the same as it is now. Hasn't changed. I've matured like a little bit. My snack taste hasn't. So I'm Ben Wynn. I manage community and events at Catalyst. And my go-to snack then and now is ants on a log, which for those of you who don't know, is celery with peanut butter and then raisins lined up to look like ants. And yes, I still do it to look like ants on a log. My partner thinks I'm absolutely nuts. But that's my go-to.
Awesome, Ben. Interesting. Mine's is apples and peanut butter, but I have to have the crunchy peanut butter. To this day, it's still the same, and I have to have the apples cut, with the apple. Well, back in the day, we didn't have an apple cutter. Now I've upgraded. So I got the apple cutter, and I still get the peanut butter. But hello, everyone. My name's Kalina Bryant. I'm the founder of Unapologetic, a e-learning platform for underrepresented groups in the technology industry. I'm also a seasoned customer experience leader in tech as well. I am a super fan of everything customer advocacy and delighted to be here.
Fantastic. I love both of those snack ideas. Makes me think about wanting to have apples and peanut butter after this.
It's a killer snack. That is definitely always a classic. What's your Audrey? What's your go-to?
Oh gosh, that's so hard. I have to say my favorite growing up and my favorite now is still mac and cheese. My friends kind of make fun of me because I'm always in the hunt for looking for the best mac and cheese out there. So I always have kind of a reserve stack of Annie's mac and cheese, but I always, whenever going out to eat, look for mac and cheese on the menu.
Nice. I like that. I'm a fan.
All right. Well, let's get started. Ben, I guess we'll start with you. So what is one way that a customer advisory board has impacted your company?
I don't think I explained. I forget if I mentioned very quickly. Catalyst Software is a leading customer success platform. So obviously, customer experience is super high priority for us. I launched our cab with a lot of helpful guidance and advice from Kalina last year, and it was very successful and it was a lot of fun. One of the key things that I took away that changed sort of our trajectory was we just got feedback. Like we got all the people in our cab were representative of our ICP, the people that we wanted to engage and sell to. And for me on the marketing side and the community side, hearing from them directly about what they're liking, what they're not liking in the space, as well as with our product and our company, was extremely helpful. So one thing that I got out of it was one specific chief customer officer at a major customer of ours said that basically he hadn't been engaging with any of our content. And he didn't engage with anyone's content because basically he said it's all fluff. Everyone's just trying to put out stuff, be a thought leader, like it's all this fluffy whatever. He's like, if I'm going to click on something, I want like a very specific how I did this thing. Like I am this person at this company and this is what I did and this was the results in like as few words as possible. So that prompted us to launch something called Catalyst, which I'll drop actually in the session chat. Which I think is the right place, which is basically a collection of interviews that are all shaped around that like very specific how to. Kalina's featured in it as well. Definitely recommend checking it out. But that was something that just changed our whole content strategy, was just hearing right from our ICP's lips exactly what they would engage with. And that has helped us reach a whole new audience.
That's really useful to think about, like using the customer to really have that drive the product and have them be a major part in terms of just making sure that you're really including their voice in terms of the way that your vision and your product roadmap looks like. So thanks for sharing that. Kalina, in terms of your experience, what are some of the key challenges and mistakes that you've experienced when developing a cab? I know that you've had multiple experience building multiple different cabs. So can you share with us some kind of key challenges or mistakes that you've experienced?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I would say it's not per se about mistakes. I think that you have to think about what you want from the customer advisory board. I would say that if you're going to build this for the first time, I wouldn't rush. Me and Ben have talked about this a good amount of time. I would say you're taking your most elite customers, your most valuable customers, and asking for their time. So I would say many people do try to move fast and get things done right away. You can't build a cab in 1 month. If you do, I don't believe that would be such a great customer advisory board. I actually always challenge people to design a charter. A charter details the mission of your cab. It details the goals, benefits on both sides, benefits for your company, benefits for your customers. It also details expectations on both ends too. What are you going to provide your customer if you're going to take a full day from them? And also, what is that customer, if they agree to participate, what does that commitment look like for them? Is it 12 months? Is it 18 months? Are they expected to attend 2 in-person meetings? Given the world that we're in now, is it going to be virtual? Is it still a commitment for a half day or a whole day? I would say being very clear on that will help you avoid mistakes. And I think that it also challenges you too as well. Every single customer advisory board I've designed, I've always had a steering committee that has my key stakeholders from the right department. So you got your product team, someone from your customer success leadership team, someone from your marketing side, and really product management. And then sometimes someone from the sales side as well, because they actually know who the right person is, who they want you to go after when it comes to the right champion. I would say that steering committee and that charter is key so you can avoid mistakes. There's always going to be some type of hiccup. Nothing is perfect. But if you do start with the baseline of the steering committee and the charter, it's easier to fix those problems or potential problems. And it's easier to make sure that the customers always treat it top of mind when you actually outline those key expectations.
That makes a lot of sense. And, I know that you had talked about the steering committee. How soon would you start gathering the information for putting together the steering committee? And when would you appropriately reach out to the customer to have them participate as part of a CAB?
Yeah, I think you should have sign-offs for everything. So the steering committee, I try to nominate our internal stakeholders. And Ben, I'm not sure if you did this as well, but just getting a solid list, I try to map it all out. It's like a vision on your deck. So you have yourself as sort of the orchestrator, whoever the customer advisory board manager is. You're sort of the center of making sure all that information is communicated, people understand their roles and deadlines. Ask them to be a part of the steering committee, over and incentivize as to why their opinion is so valuable and why they need to be on that steering committee and how it makes a big impact on that customer. I would say once that steering committee is validated, everyone's in, then I would say then that's when you go into that charter. That charter is going to be edited, right, by all of your steering committee members because they have expectations and goals for their departments as well. This also helps you outline what's the metrics and what's the value, because with your customer advisory board to get buy-in, you're going to be obviously giving experience, surprise, and delight to these customers. So you're going to have to carve out a certain amount of budget. In order to receive budget from your senior leaders, what is going to be the metrics to measure this customer advisory board on? Is it going to be increase in testimonials, increase in brand awareness? To Ben's point, is it going to be an understanding as to what type of content your customer is looking for to be challenged, not just on product feedback, but to be challenged on what do we look like from an external perspective? It's a lot harder when you're always inside the organization. You believe what you believe because you're reading it all the time. But when a customer comes to you and actually says, hey, I want to see this, it changes your thought process. And it also, that steering committee values that because they know how they want to plan their next fiscal year based on that feedback. Would you chime in on that, Ben? Anything else I missed?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think, yeah, you touched on a lot of really key points. I think a couple of ones, the key ones that stand out for me that might be helpful is I formed a Slack team. I like a Slack group within our Slack for our steering committee. So that helped us organize, and there was representation from customer success, from product, executive leadership, basically everyone whose sign off would be needed in order to reach out to our biggest customers. And so everyone needed to sign off on communications, on the charter, on the agenda. And I think one of the other things that you were sort of alluding to at the end is that I think people need to think about, because it probably goes back to Audrey's question about common mistakes, is thinking about the value for the CAB members first and foremost. I think a lot of mistakes that companies make is they say, okay, we're going to get all our customers together in one room. We're going to get their feedback on the product roadmap. We're going to get them to look at these features. We're going to get them to give us insight on X, Y, and Z. But why should the customer be giving you, is it a half day, a full day? And you're trying to get VPs, C-suite, like in the room. You have to think about what value they want to get out of it. What topics are they going to want to talk about? Besides giving them an incredible gift or, whatever it is, lunch, dinner, a show, whatever it is you're doing with them. What value can they find? Because for a lot of them, there's value in them meeting each other, because maybe they can buy from and sell to each other. Maybe they can co-market something. Maybe they can, hire someone. Like that's a huge thing as well. And I think that's important to think about when you're thinking about your first CAB is, from the customer's perspective, what's the value that they are going to get out of this? Not just what are we going to get out of it as a company.
That's a great point. I guess with that, what's the tipping point? Where should you start considering integrating this into like your company? Should you consider this at like an early stage growth company? Would you consider this as you already have received funding?
I think it's a
great. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Kalina. Yeah, please.
I think it's a really good question, actually. I think that when you have a good cohort of customers that you value, I would say it depends on which stage you're at, right? If you are looking to go up market with enterprise accounts, that might change your perspective. If you're looking to scale, maybe becoming a unicorn company, you might take your elite customers, let's say the top 15. But I would say it depends on when you're ready to get solid feedback on your product, when you're ready to go up market is a big thing. So if you're going to go up market, if you're looking to be a certain leader in that Magic Quadrant, for example, what is your competition doing, right? How are they a little bit above you? What's the difference with your product and someone else's? You're going to actually have to ask yourself those questions. When you ask yourself those questions, it's time to actually start to get that advisory board going, because you only see things within your company. Your customers are also getting poached by your competitors. They're showcasing what they can give you. So if you turn those valuable customers into the advisory board, they become partners, and they're willing to showcase competitive analysis that they might get from somewhere else. They're willing to share, hey, I want to commit to you for 3 to 5 years, but in order to do that, I need you to have the product to look like this. So they're actually becoming a partner for you and showcasing and telling you, giving you a playbook really of, if you want me as a long-term partner and increase of revenue, I need to see X, Y, and Z. And that builds trust, right? So I would say it depends on what stage you're in and when you're ready to be competitive and go up market.
If I could add on to that, I think I want to hammer home one thing that you mentioned, Kalina, because I think is so critical, because I think if you're going to ask anything at a customer advisory board meeting, especially if you're a SaaS company, asking them something along those lines, what would you need to see in order for you to sign a 3-year or a 5-year contract with us? What would our product need to look like or to do for you to be spending double what you're spending with us right now? Like, that's one, like, the answers to that question can completely change the trajectory of your company and have an incredible impact on revenue. The other thing I'll mention in terms of timing, just to think about, because I'm, I'd say it's my modus operandi to like run into things blind, just and figure shit out as I go. So with a cab, you don't want to do that, because I think one of the criteria to think about is, if you're too early and if your product isn't mature enough yet, what you risk happening is bringing 10 of your biggest customers together and having it devolve into a, let's crap on this company. Like, let's all talk about, let's rally together and demand these features, or else we're all whatever. Like, you run the risk of those sorts of negative interactions, which you don't want to have happening. You want it to be very constructive. You do want their feedback. But if your product isn't ready for it, if your company's not at a stage where there's some great stuff and value that customers are getting, and there are some things that you want to work on, and it's just about prioritizing the product roadmap or getting their feedback on things like your content strategy or your customer engagement or your professional services, figuring out that balance is definitely critical.
I'd add on to that too. That's a good one, Ben. I would say, I think you hit the mark, right? If you're looking to have that customer advisory board, you are thinking about those top 10 customers, your elite ones. If you are just looking to get something smaller, like feedback on professional services, feedback on, some type of new gadget, beta testing, challenge yourself to think about councils. You can have many customer councils that are dedicated to one niche. But at least with that council, you're not going after your biggest and brightest. You want to make sure that if you're going to go after your biggest and brightest, that you want to commit to this customer advisory board. If you want to do a trial and error, start off with a mini council. That council could have 20 people, 30 people. They can all be in the same industry. They can all do beta testing for one specific piece of your product, or actually give feedback on how can we improve onboarding. I would say if you're only looking to improve onboarding, don't do a customer advisory board, do a council. And then start to do multiple ones of those, right? Like, maybe you're just starting off, and this could be a whole year where you just run a council program, and you might commit to having 3 strategic councils. Maybe after that year, your team can test to see what valuable information did we receive. Did we receive an increase in engagement? Did our customers a part of this council expand or retain with us? Did we see an increase in utilization and adoption? If that's the case, that's a baseline and benchmarks to say we are ready for a customer advisory board. And also, if your CAB members, when you're starting to invite, if they challenge you on what else do you have, like, have you done this before? Is it successful? You can always give examples from that council to get additional buy-in from those customers.
Wow, that's actually a really great point. We're going through this actually currently with our own company, thinking about having beta testers and having the idea of reaching out to our customers to have them provide input in terms of products that we have that we're releasing onto the product roadmap. But I hadn't thought about the idea of having a council versus a CAB. So thank you so much for sharing that. I guess with thinking about a CAB and thinking about kind of resources and teams, Ben, would you mind sharing kind of teams and resources that you would need in order to be able to launch a CAB? In your experience, like what are kind of key things that a team needs in order to be able to make this successful?
Yeah, I mean, COVID sort of changed a lot because ideally, your CAB, your customer advisory board is like, hey, we're flying you all in, or we're flying you to like this cool place, and we have this day of programming or a day and a half of programming, and it's like this whole mixture of things. And if you're doing that, you'll need some additional resources most likely. For us, we launched our customer advisory board during COVID, so it was a remote meeting, and critical resources were customer success. So having whoever's leading CS there, because if you're going to be reaching out to the top 10 customers or 15 customers at your company, they need to sign off on all that communication. You need executive buy-in, so you need someone on the C-suite who's going to support the initiative, attend the initiative, be the leader for that. For us, it was our CEO. Ideally, and then you'd want to loop in other teams like product and marketing. Like there should be some representation. I know that HubSpot actually live streams their customer advisory board meetings to their entire company, so that everyone can see it as it's happening. They can't all engage. There's still a small group that's leading it, but it's all about dissemination of that information and putting the customer first. And then, I mean, for us, because it was remote in terms of budget, we couldn't unfortunately do the big flashy, day and a half event. So we just put as much as we could into creating really genuine, interesting gifts for people. We did custom painted wine bottles. So we had a professional artist paint each CAB member's face on a wine bottle, which we then sent to them, and they're sort of holding our logo. We sent them, work from home uniforms. So it was like a sweatshirt, sweatpants, slippers, sleeping mask, all Catalyst branded, really comfy. We sent them Blue Yeti microphones. We sent them, like a really nice sort of welcome pack. And that was that was the most budget I think we had to spend. Kalina, I'm not sure if you have any other kind of critical resources you'd add to that list.
Yeah. I actually was taking some notes. I like that, especially because we don't know when we're going to be back in office or have that flexibility to fly everyone in. I think that whole package is something to take note of. Might want to think about doing a catalog of how to still find success with CABs in a virtual layout. But I think you hit it spot on. Just communicating with your team is the best way possible. I would say getting sign off, to your point, having a sponsor such as your CEO is crucial. I would say if you can't get the CEO, at least get someone that can help push those invitations for you. That's a big thing. The ball starts rolling when you have the target list that you're trying to go after. I call it my kind of key roster. But you can't do anything without roster until, to your point, Ben, that head of customer success is signed off, the head of whoever the salesperson is. You never want to reach out to a customer without having the right stakeholders knowing that invitation is going out. That messes up relationships internally. I would say over communicating in this type of project is better than under communicating.
Absolutely.
It makes a lot of sense. I was thinking about, we had recently had our first customer event earlier this month. And as part of our kind of curation and our gifts to our customers, we were thinking about what would make sense to be able to present to them virtually to keep them engaged. And, I was thinking about some of the gifts that you had mentioned, Ben, as great ways to be able to follow up for some of the people that we had invited as key speakers for our customer event. So thanks for that. I took some notes as well.
And for the record, I stole the welcome pack idea from Mike Rizzo at MavenLink in SF. They also run a great community in CAB. So I'm a big fan in stealing great ideas. So I love when people steal mine as well. So keep stealing forward.
Well, they say that, what is it? Copying is the best form of flattery.
Good artist copy. Oh, I was going to say good Good artists copy, great artists steal was the one I was thinking of, but that's one of my favorite quotes too.
I'll have to steal that one from you.
Go for it.
All right. So I want to take some questions from the audience as well. I saw that there was one that actually was really interesting. What are kind of key factors that drove the design of your cab, and what kind of platform do you use? Do you use any like internal tools or software tools?
For us, we just use Zoom. We did it all on Zoom. Quite simple. You know, it'd be nice to use something like Goldcast or something like that, but when we launched it at that time, we didn't have a virtual events platform. So yeah, it was pretty simplistic. It was just more on scheduling. So you know, figuring a time that worked for everyone, and then all meeting on Zoom together, having a very specific agenda. That's pretty much it from my end.
Okay.
I think one thing to keep in mind too that I've been exploring is what do you do with the information afterwards? The loophole. So a lot of the times the customer feedback loop is super important. You get so much information from those meetings, but the follow-up is more important than the actual meeting and making sure nothing slips. So I've been trying to figure out what's the best way to communicate that to all of our like heads, right? Head of product and the head of CS, so they understand their book of business when they're starting to redesign how they do onboarding, how they engage, but then from the product side, also product marketing, how we articulate that information, especially after getting the feedback, whether it's good or bad. Like maybe you continue doing exactly what you're doing, maybe you just change one thing. But what I've seen go well and also go bad is you get all this juicy information and then 6 months goes by, no one communicates with that customer advisory board member anymore. It just sort of slowly trickles down, or the customer advisory board members, you have another meeting and they're asking you, I gave you all this feedback and you didn't do anything with it. So it sort of dilutes the expectations of the cab. So I would say try to use, you know, a certain tool. I track a lot of things with Asana. I track a lot of things, you know, inside Google Docs, but I make sure it's shareable so all of the key stakeholders can see that. Just so within like a month or two, you could still follow up with those cab members and they're still engaged with you.
Yeah, I guess Kalina, as a follow-up, you know, how often would you reach out to your cab? Because I know you had stressed the emphasis of not reaching out too often, but at the same time, you still want to keep them engaged. Can you kind of give us like what cadence has worked really well for you?
Yeah, I try to pop in once a quarter. So let's just say you do 2 meetings a year. Those 2 meetings could be split up every 6 months. But in between that, I would say I try to do some type of surprise and delight, whether there's a holiday or some type of event going on with the company that I'm working with. So looking at what does every quarter look like and what's something that we could reach out to them. Maybe it's just a survey, maybe it's just a recap, maybe it's preparing them for the next meeting. I usually try to send surveys to tailor that agenda to make sure that every single person feels heard. So we might share that agenda 3 months in advance, but they might, let's say in this case, we're thinking about return to office and how does that actually work? So instead of just focusing only on product, sometimes your customers might want to talk about what's going on in the real world and how that affects the ultimate day-to-day and the product, etc. So I would say four times a year is best. Some could just be surprise and delight. I always send, let's say, holiday gifts to our cab members. They don't have to give us anything. There's not a meeting. It's just more so summing up all the things that we have achieved together with this customer advisory board. And then just saying warm wishes and looking forward to partnering, you know, in the next upcoming year. So I would say try to do 2 touch points that's very actionable and giving them updates and engaging. And then 2, just very generous. We're still, you know, working with you all. Thank you for your support. Just remember us with our brand, remember us for our engagement. So I think 4 is a good one. Ben, what do you think about that?
I mean, I just took a note because I think I'm still learning because I think, well, I did that first meeting, you know, we did all the follow-up, we did some nice, you know, recapping, you know, we closed the loop on sort of all the feedback that had been given, which was great. We added them all to a Slack channel, and then now we've migrated that to our customer community. So they're in a group together. It's not super active, but I do like the idea of, you know, the quarterly cadence. So I just took down a note to start to launch a quarterly customer advisory board newsletter. And we can think about exactly what those sections would be that go in there. But I think, given that they're all super busy, I think that's why they're not, you know, engaging in the community as much. Like they have a million priorities. They're high-level tech execs at these massively fast-growing companies. So I think what they would appreciate is if we can give them like a very quick like cab snapshot newsletter every quarter that's just like sort of updates on things that we know are important to them, direction of the company, things like that, almost like what we'd send investors, but like much more pared down. So thanks for that idea.
No problem. Yeah. Sharing is how we all thrive, I think, to your point.
I mean, I called it stealing, but yours sounds much nicer, so.
Yeah.
I guess it's how you frame it, right?
Sure, that's what I tell the police. Okay, sorry, continue.
Well, you know, I know with certain companies, in terms of like growth stage companies, it's great to be able to share some of these ideas and to be able to be generous with your customers. For customers that are still kind of in the early stage start, where, you know, they're watching every single dollar that goes through, what are kind of workarounds to be able to really say that we appreciate the customer, but might be a little bit more lean in terms of like the lean in terms of the cost, but not in terms of the generosity?
Well, I think in that case, I mean, without sounding dark, COVID might be your friend, because you have a perfect excuse not to fly everyone somewhere cool and do like a huge, you know, out of control party for the cab. It's, you know, you send them a gift, and if you can't do like I think our budget was something like $250 per gift or something like that per person, and if that's too high, like just something small and heartfelt. That's the thing that was most appreciated from us, was not the most expensive thing, which was probably the microphone, but it was the wine bottle, because it was personalized, it was unique, and it was thoughtful, because it was for you, not for like all of you. It was each individual. So handwritten card from your CEO, you know, one small gift or something that's custom to them, that'll go a long way.
That's a really great point. Kalina, how about you in terms of gifts that you've given customers that might not be on the expensive side, but might have been more on the heartfelt side? What do you think has really kind of landed and hit the mark with customers?
Well, I did one really good customer advisory board actually right before COVID, and we did a mixology course. We actually had so we did have some individuals, 2 people on the cab that actually didn't drink, but we were able to do like is it mocktail? Yeah, mocktails for them. And we tailored like a really unique sort of like ingredients and menu for them. And then they got like this handle full of like special mixing and all that. And they actually really appreciate it. But I think that was nice. But the other thing that was really great was for the holidays, we actually got these sketched out tote bags that were extremely unique to them. And we, on one side, sketched out all of the cities that we had for our office, for the company that I was at. And then in the front, we had really nice engravements showcasing that they were a elite cab member. And at that time, I was working at a commerce company. And so to really brand like fearless commerce, I think that was something extremely huge for them. So it was something where they were proud. I remember having a kind of big e-commerce store reach out and saying that they wouldn't mind going to the grocery store with that. They were proud to rock it. And we're talking about like individuals that were working at the Gucci's of the world, and here they are with this tote that it was customizable. You know, it was something that was unique to them. So you go from wanting to wear like a $4,000 tote bag to I'm just gonna wear this that my cab member sent me. I really appreciated that. I had no idea I had a really killer team that was just thinking about these ideas. It actually spun off of a Saint Laurent tote bag that just came out that year. And the girl on my team, actually, that was her wish list for her Christmas gift from her boyfriend. And she's like, I really want this. So I would say it depends on, I would say have a rock star team. Honestly, I've always tried to hire someone that was savvy with the fashion, savvy with the Pinterest and what's going on in the industry. Because even though you can't buy the Saint Laurent bag, right, for your customers, you can technically make something customizable that's unique to them, that will give an emotional touch, that will make them feel proud to receive that. And actually be able to take a picture of it and say, I never would have thought of this. So I would challenge you to have a really out of the box team that, doesn't do everything by the books, but they actually think about, well, if I was a cab member, what would I want? That's usually a big question that I ask myself. Like, if I was going to receive this, even the way it's open, right? Like, how it feels when someone just gives you, let's say this is my teacup. If someone just gives this to me, it's just a teacup. But if they package it with beautiful tissue, a handwritten note, and they put it in a nice bag, all of a sudden it becomes it's an experience. So I would always challenge people to think about that. If you don't have the budget, that doesn't mean anything. It really means on how you articulate that gift, how you make that customer feel. That's what they're going to remember. Customers, especially elite customers, they get a million gifts from customers or from vendor day, especially with the holidays. What's going to make you different? Everyone's getting something right now. The buzz was the blanket, right? The therapy blankets last year for the holidays. Everyone received one of those. What makes your blanket different than the competitor? Is there a handwritten note from your CEO? Is it a favorite color that you know from that customer because you had them take a survey for you, or you just listen to them in one of those meetings? So try to be as, I think, impactful as possible and intentional. I think that's the sweet spot of our role, right? Whenever you're building a customer advisory board, you're always picking someone to run that actually takes attention to detail and focuses on the experience of the customer.
I love both of those ideas. Wow. It makes me think about kind of gifts that I've received in the past before. I know that all of us have probably received like company mugs and sweatshirts and whatnot, but thinking about ways to make it impactful, like I love the idea, for example, of the handwritten note, or I also love the idea of, taking conversations that you've used in the past before, like knowing about like details about that customer, that really makes it that much further in terms of that personal touch. So that's that's something that I want to keep in mind in terms of ways to continue to engage customers, especially when they are doing kind of above and beyond what normally customers do in terms of sharing their impact. In terms of the cab, I want to transition over in terms of how does your cab drive growth and impact in your revenue? Kalina, do you want to start first, and then Ben?
Yeah. So I think it's always interesting when you think about your top. Let's say you're only going to have max 15 members on your cab, right? I think when you start to go a little bit above that, you lose the intimacy of the customer advisory board and the feedback. But when you're looking at that, I always challenge people, if you're tracking this, and if you're not, maybe you should, what's the utilization that's taking place, like the percentage of utilization in that account? What is the penetration? So let's just say you have whatever account it is, they're using 40% of you, right? So let's just say you have opportunity for more wall-to-wall deployment. So if someone is using 40%, but however they have a larger amount of seats that you could sell to them, I would challenge, how do you want to see that number go up? And so looking at utilization, looking at the percentage of penetration within that account, I would give yourself a goal to say maybe you want to see the adoption or utilization go up by 15% within this account. Or maybe you want to commit to getting a certain amount of prospects. So this is another thing, like new business and referrals. So I would say, if you look at 3 things, right, you have utilization, you have penetration of account, and then you have referrals. You can challenge yourself to where maybe you only want 2 referrals out of that customer advisory board, but you never know, those 2 referrals could be some of the largest deals ever. You have to understand that your CAB members are already extremely elite, extremely successful. So they have friends and colleagues that are just as successful. And if they enjoy your product and they give you a personalized introduction, you never know, you can be introduced to your first $1.2 million deal, just throwing it like a number out there. But that's prospects that you are getting into your pipeline that you wouldn't have the opportunity to do so any other place. So that's one point. And then I would say, working closely with your customer success team, whatever that number is, I would challenge you, right? Are you focused on attrition, right? Are you seeing a big drop in your customer base? If that's the case, you can make a very big goal saying this customer advisory board is going to challenge us to show us why are we losing clients, what's really irritating them that makes them not even enjoy our product. So maybe you give yourself a goal of decrease in attrition by 20% by this year. So I would really challenge you to say, if you're trying to increase your revenue, what does that look like? How do you measure it to begin with? Are you looking at sort of bottoms line of the contract? Are you looking for maybe your customers are only signing 1-year deals? Do you want to challenge yourself where your customer advisory members, at least 2 of them sign for the first time 3-year contracts? That's a big jump, right? And it's like, if you can actually get over the hump by a 1-year to a 3-year contract, if you understand the special sauce and the playbook of how you got there, then that's a playbook that you would share with your entire sales organization and CS organization. And you would now put a goal to say, we want all customers to have 3-year contracts. So I would say you really need to look at where you are. If you're focused on utilization, think about that. If you're focused on churn, think about that. If you're focused on expansion, really try to outline your goals to do a trial run with those CAB members, because that's the biggest opportunity that you have. You have basically 15 members that will commit to you long term if you are to show them value with that board.
Ben, how about you? In terms of growth and impact, I know that Kalina had shared different areas of focus. Or rather, how does CAB drive growth and impact in terms of organizations that you've been with?
For us, I mean, at the growth stage, I think the biggest thing is just hearing what's most important to the key stakeholders. They helped us prioritize our product roadmap. If you're a growing company and you've got limited engineering resources and product resources, then it's important to make sure you're building the most important things for the majority of your revenue holders, essentially, at all times. And balancing that with a vision, obviously, for your product and your company, but that was extremely helpful, and that has a huge impact on revenue. And it let us answer some of those critical questions to the group survival and ultimate thriving of the company, which is, if we build this by this date, will we be providing enough value that your contract could grow to X? Or if we don't build this integration or this by this time, like, are you going to churn? Are you going to leave us? And those are some of the most critical questions. And getting answers to those were extremely helpful for our team, for product, for sales, and it helped us prioritize. So I think that's the biggest way it's impacted us so far in terms of revenue.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I guess if you don't mind touching base on, as an early stage startup, what are ways that you take the advice from your CAB, and then what are ways that you say this actually might not line up with what we originally have in our product roadmap? Can you kind of share, how do you differentiate, okay, should I listen to the customer at the end of the day, or should I kind of stay traditional and true to what we've already kind of planned and built out for our product roadmap?
Yeah, I've got a couple specific thoughts on this. I'll quickly share, because I think it's really critical in terms of how you phrase these questions and how you set the agenda. So the way we did it is we laid out our product roadmap, and we went through it. We explained what was coming up over the next year, and then we asked for their feedback. We didn't ask, what at least open-ended questions around what else would you like to see on here, or all the kind of dream. We didn't ask for their wish list. What we said was, this is what we intend on building over the next year. What we want you to do is give us feedback on the prioritization of these things. That way they still have a big say in what we build and when we build it, but it's within a box. They can't come up with something out of nowhere and demand that we build it and derails our whole product roadmap. Eventually, we're still building the product we want to build. That's part one. The second part was in terms of framing, when you do get to that ideation point of, what would you like us to build? We made it very clear that, okay, now we're transitioning to this open forum, anything goes. You want an integration with Bumble and our customer success platform? Great, let's hear it. You want us to, put out a champagne as well as a CS platform? Great, tell us about it. Like we really leaned all into that and laid the groundwork of like, this is not a commitment to building. This is not you're not requesting features. You're giving us product ideas, things that you might love to see in the platform at some point in the future. Our team is going to take back all your ideas, and if there's something there, then we'll keep working and following down that train of thought. And if not, then it's not a big deal because we're just brainstorming together. And that's something I've seen people build into their communities as well. Instead of having a product feedback or a feature requests and having a feature requests category, it's feature ideas. And even that change of syntax, is that syntax? No, change of vocabulary, changes the context in people's minds. And it goes from, oh, your feature request was either accepted or rejected. Instead of that, it's now your feature idea was heard and accepted. And if eventually that becomes an actual request or becomes a thing, amazing. If not, the company isn't rejecting you. There's no negative connotation to that.
I think that's a really good point, Ben. It's always on how you deliver.
Mm-hmm. Oh, we lost your sound, Audrey.
Sorry about that. Problems of Zoom, I think, these days. So, Kalina, I wanted to ask, in terms of kind of benefits for a customer advisory board, I know that we had talked about product enhancements and marketing strategy and sales. What are kind of benefits that you've seen in terms of driving the product roadmap? I know Ben had alluded to the idea that we outlined product roadmap at the beginning of the year and asked for impact in terms of prioritization. Can you tell us, I guess, from your perspective, what are kind of the benefits of having the customer advisory board in terms of driving other sectors, such as the marketing sector or the pricing or sales sector of your company?
No, that's a good point. So I'll start off. One is, if we think about the product, I've seen this happen a few years ago, actually, building a cab. I flat out had a customer say, don't do that. Your competition is trying to do that. And they actually had, showcase a lot of demos. They actually gave us feedback as to what our competitors were doing and why it was not a good idea. And it was interesting because my CEO had attended that cab. It was in New York, probably, about 5 years ago. But we were actually very stuck on this was going to make and break our company, and we thought, oh, this is going to be game changer. And it was interesting because he brought it up and every customer in the room actually agreed. And that was something that we hadn't seen before. It was the first ever cab that we did for the company. It was a startup as well, and we were in a hyper growth stage. And I would say, when you're thinking about competition, I can't express, your customer advisory board can really help you in that area, because you're just doing your own research, right? You have someone probably within your organization that their whole job is just to look at competitive analysis. But when you're actually getting things from the customers that your competition wants, that's no brainer, right? It's something that is priceless. It's something that, that can actually give you the value of your full cab that year. Making sure that you are different from your competition. I would say the second thing is, from a sales perspective, referrals is really key. I think in startup world, if you have buy-in from your select cab members, to be honest with you, you only need 1 or 2 referrals where that CEO actually connects you to another CEO. And they actually sing your praises on the product and also the experience that they receive within your organization. I would say, no matter how you look at your sales side, you have plenty of SDRs that give you different opportunities, and you can work those prospects, etc. But money can't buy one introduction from a CEO that basically says, I'm going to set up a lunch for you. I think that you guys should work with X, Y, and Z as well. That referral can really increase the revenue. It can put your company on the map, depending on the type of cab member that you have that's giving you that introduction. You never know, that could be a Fortune 500 company that he's introducing you to. That can be an elite customer that is willing to do press releases with you, case studies, etc. So that trust, and also just the opportunities that you'll be able to access from a sales perspective, I think that is crucial for you. It's something that's not really talked about A lot of the times, if you think about Silicon Valley and all of our different tech companies, the valley is very small, right? So every customer knows someone. And a lot of the times it's all about, well, would you recommend this one? This is why we are so keen on third-party reviews. This is why we are so keen on customer experience now, because word of mouth trumps how good your product is. You get the best product, but if there's 500 customers that say they love your product, okay, great, they're going to go with you. But if there is kind of 5 elite customers that say they don't care about your product, is not that innovative, that can make and break you. So I would say, from a sales perspective, getting buy-in and getting that referral, but also having references. Many people don't talk about references too much until they really need the reference. The more you scale within your organization, the bigger your accounts are. And so when those accounts are coming to you before they sign, the bigger your contracts are, they're going to want 2 to 3 references, customer references. And you don't want to overutilize some of your customer references. So as you get larger, on a monthly basis, you might be producing 5 to 10 customer references. With those references, the reference can either have that contract signed for you that day, or that competition, your competition can go somewhere else just because of that reference. I would say with your CAB members, you actually have, if you're going to have 10 CAB members or 15 CAB members, long term, if you are doing your role right with the CAB, you actually have 15 references that are willing to go to bat for your product. They're willing to talk to any customer for you. Usually they're at a higher level, so these CAB members might be VP and above, and they can actually sell for you. And that's something that I think your sales team will appreciate long term.
Then I guess, following up with Kalina, in terms of areas of focus for like marketing and sales, how have your CAB impacts your customer success team, your marketing team, your sales team? How's their opinion been looped in? And I know that we mentioned having like 10 to 15 people. Do you have members that are more active than not? And how do you make sure that the opinion of all of your CAB members is really heard?
Yeah, I mean, the first point, I think the biggest thing is sort of tied to that story I shared right at the beginning, right? Their feedback on the content they were seeing in the space helped us create a more targeted content strategy that would appeal to our ICP, our ideal customer profile. So their feedback was very valuable on that. I wouldn't say they had a very strong impact on our direct sales, more of our marketing and community engagement. We take a very, we're a community-led growth company. So it's that stuff is what's most important to us, is knowing what people in these roles at these companies are thinking, feeling, challenged by. Those are critically important if we're going to always stay relevant and be providing value. What was the second half of the question you asked me?
Yeah, so I said, in terms of impact, we have like 10, 15 members of your CAB. How do you make sure that all of their opinions, are either heard?
Oh. Yeah, I mean, so one thing, we send a pre and post survey, and that gives us an idea of, what they're thinking, what their priorities are. We can make sure that we hit everything on their list. We send them the agenda in advance. I saw someone submitted a question on, sorry, I'm going to steer the question, this question over, because I think her question was great, but she was asking how you actually go about building the CAB itself, what that process is. And I promise this all ties in, but we basically put together our list, a short list as a team, but basically our customer success team and leadership were the ones to start that process, put everything in, narrowed it down, picked our top 10, and then our marketing team drafted a message for our CEO to send to each of them individually, that was very customized, that included the high-level agenda, and included some of the other people that would be attending, so that they felt it was very important and special that they were being invited, which it was. So we had our CEO do all the invites, and then from there, I, as the coordinator of the CAB, followed up with the CAB charter, like Kalina mentioned, as well as a more detailed agenda and just some other details, the pre-survey. And that way, when the meet actually came, we knew, obviously who would be there, but we knew what was most important to them to cover, and we could make sure that we'd already gotten their feedback on the agenda, and that no one would be leaving being like, oh crap, I wish we'd talked about this issue, or I'm not happy because we talked about this and I didn't want to talk about that. And that also helps us steer the conversation and make sure everyone's heard. I think you have to conduct it the way you'd conduct any meeting, right? There's going to be naturally people who are loud, consistent talkers that think out loud, and they'll just, I'm guilty of this. Like, I talk until I figure out what I actually want to say. Whereas other people are more introverted and thoughtful, and they are quiet until they have something they want to say. And so, having a facilitator be the person to make sure that everyone is being called on, everyone at least has the opportunity to share, and it's not being dominated, the conversation is not being dominated by, the 2 or 3 loudest members of the cab, I think are critical as well. So hopefully that answered a couple questions in one. And Kalina, I'm sure I left out some steps in that very quick 30-second process.
I think you're spot on. Like that's the basics, right? For anyone that's listening, I think that Ben has given you sort of like the top 5, right? If you can just stick to what he just said, I mean, there's going to be different bumps and stuff, but at least you have the baseline to know what is next. You can actually outline what you might want to achieve in the next 3 months just by what Ben has stated. And I would say lean on the different communities, right? You don't have to do this all by yourself. Customer advisory boards didn't just start, they've been around for years. So leverage others that are experts at it, leverage others that have went through challenges, and pick people's brain. Just because you propose something the first time doesn't mean that it has to stick to that. I would say that's why you work with incredible people, smart people in your organization. Leverage them. They want to help. It's a team thing. Don't try to take on this all by yourself. Just because you might be the owner of the cab or the program or the coordinator, you have resources. Use them.
That's really good. That's really good. Ben, Kalina, I know that we've had a lot of fun talking about this, about building cabs and talking about, what stage we should build them, and what are things that we should think about in terms of just making sure that you're really utilizing the customer's stories in order to be able to think about how you want to drive your product. What is one takeaway that you want the audience to walk away with today? And with that, can you tell us a little bit more about what's next for you? What's next in terms of what's going on in your world, Ben, and what's going on in your world, Kalina?
Ben, you want
to start, or would you like me to?
I can go. I would say, just to answer your first question, Audrey, when building these customer advisory boards, sometimes you get lost into the weeds of what the company wants and what everyone else wants. I would say you can't go wrong if you always think about what the customer will want. Why would they say yes to committing to you for 12 months? Why would they come to a meeting and give you 6 hours of their day, or on this case, it's Zoom, so maybe 2 or 3 hours? Why would they do that? So I would always just challenge yourself and ask yourself why. Every time you're progressing, every time you're getting ready to do those invites, every time they're, just thinking about the establishment of your cab, just keep in mind, why would our customer do this? Would they be satisfied? And I think that you can't go wrong with your customer advisory board that way, because your customer is actually top of mind. We see a lot of branding, right, where we're customer centric, or customer's always right, or customer first. Stay true to that. Just don't brand it and externally say that, but be thoughtful, because it will go a long way. You never know. Your customers will always bounce around, give you introductions, etc. Make sure you keep them top of mind. And I would say what's next on my end, I'm actually building a lot of different playbooks. That's what has worked well in my past when it comes to customer experience, all the way from customer advisory boards, councils, user groups, newsletters, you name it. So the playbooks are coming out actually in November. So if you want to pick my brain or just understand details as to what has worked personally for me, that's going to be coming soon. I would say follow Unapologetic and just stay up to date with the latest and greatest, and you'll see more to come in November.
That's fantastic.
I'd echo similar mentality. As a key takeaway, always lead with value. Whether it's for your cab or just in life, just always lead with value. Focus on creating value for others. And that will go way, way farther than if you focus on the value you want to get from others. So start with that mentality and keep that. The other thing I wanted to mention that's next for me, one thing that I think is, I don't know if it's a key mistake, but cabs are great, but they focus on like the CCO or the CEO or the VP of the company. What I'm launching next is so our end users are customer success managers. So I'm launching a customer success manager cab as well. And that way I know exactly what the top line, like people signing the checks, are thinking about and care about. And I also know what the CSMs who are using our product and are in our product every day are thinking about. So that's something that I'll be doing next. And launching the quarterly newsletter that I got from Kalina today.
Well, that's fantastic.
Just a note on that, Ben. I think that's really good. I actually got challenged on this a few weeks back saying, is this the right person to go after when we think about C-level? So kudos. I can't wait to see for the customer success cab to come out, the manager one.
Well, excellent. Thank you so much, guys, for this discussion on how to build your customer advisory board and how to work with them. Just if those of you that are still watching, just know that we do have sessions going on in another 15 minutes again to wrap up our morning sessions. If you want to take a look at those, we can go to the agenda tab in the top left and join those when they start. But I do want to give a quick round of applause to our panel here. So thank you so much for taking time out of your day. As everyone knows, this is a volunteer basis, and these guys are very busy doing a lot of work, a lot of great things. And so we appreciate you spending time and offering some insight into your perspectives on this topic. So thank you again.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
So panelists, if you want to either exit out of the tab or join me backstage, feel free to do so. And you can do that by pressing the switch button there on your bottom right.